The operating room was a sterile cage of white light and sharp steel, but I was drowning in it. My heart pounded louder than the monitors beeping around me, and the mask over my face felt like it was stealing my breath before the anesthesia could. I was 28, alone, and staring at a ceiling that promised nothing but oblivion, until he walked in. Dr. Elias Carter wasn't supposed to be my surgeon. The nurse had mentioned a Dr. Patel, but there he was, a tall black man in his early 30s, his deep brown eyes steady behind his mask. His presence filled the room like a warm current, cutting through the cold. "Javier Morales," he said, reading my chart, his voice low and calm, like he was anchoring me to the world. "I'm Elias. I've got you." Those words hit harder than they should have, and I clung to them as the world started to blur. I wasn't supposed to wake up in the middle of surgery. No one is. But my eyes fluttered open to a searing pain in my abdomen and the faint hum of machines. The room was dim, the staff gone, and I was alone. Except for him. Elias was still there, his hands steady as he worked, his brow furrowed in concentration. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, and my body felt like it was sinking into the table. He glanced up, and for a moment our eyes locked. "Stay with me, Javier," he said, his voice cutting through the fog. "You're stronger than this." I don't know how long I was awake, but it felt like hours. The pain was relentless, but Elias's voice was my lifeline. He talked to me. About his dog, a scruffy mutt named Duke, about the jazz bar he loved in downtown Seattle, about anything to keep me tethered. I didn't know why he was alone in that room, why no one else was there, but I didn't care. His words were a thread, and I held on. When I woke again, I was in recovery, the pain dulled but my mind racing. The accident that landed me here, a shattered leg and internal bleeding from a late-night car crash on I-5, had left me with more than physical scars. I'd been running from myself for years, hiding who I was behind a carefully constructed mask of indifference. Growing up in a conservative Latino family in Fresno, I'd learned early that being gay wasn't something you shouted about. I'd moved to Seattle to escape, to start over, but the loneliness followed me like a shadow. Elias came to check on me that evening. He wasn't in scrubs anymore, just a simple navy sweater that made his broad shoulders stand out. He sat by my bed, his expression softer now, less guarded. "You scared me in there," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Not many people wake up mid-surgery and decide to have a conversation. I laughed, then winced as pain shot through my side. "Didn't have much choice," I muttered. "You're a good talker." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and there was something in his gaze, something that made my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with my injuries. "You're a good listener," he said. "Most people would have panicked." We talked for hours that night, the hospital fading into the background. He told me about his life, how he'd grown up in Atlanta, the only son of a single mom who worked 2 jobs to put him through med school. He didn't say it outright, but I caught the way his voice softened when he mentioned a past relationship, the kind of pain that lingers. I told him about Fresno, about the expectations that had suffocated me, about the freedom I'd chased but hadn't quite found. It was the first time in years I'd felt seen, not just as a patient, but as a person. The next day, I was moved to a regular room, but Elias kept showing up. He'd check my chart, linger a little longer than necessary, and we'd talk about music, about dreams, about the lives we wanted but were too afraid to claim. I learned he was openly gay, something he'd fought hard to embrace in a world that didn't always make it easy. His confidence, his quiet strength, stirred something in me I'd buried deep. But there was a shadow over us. The hospital was buzzing with whispers about the night of my surgery, about why Elias had been alone in the operating room. Nurses exchanged glances, and I overheard fragments of conversations. Protocol breach. Investigation. I didn't know what it meant, but I saw the weight in Elias's eyes, the way his smile faltered when he thought I wasn't looking. Something was wrong, and I needed to know what. By the third day, I was strong enough to sit up, to feel the world steadying around me. Elias came by at dusk, his face drawn. "Javier," he said, sitting closer than usual. "There's something I need to tell you." His voice was low, urgent, and I braced myself for whatever was coming. That night in the OR, it wasn't supposed to happen like that. Elias's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken consequences. I searched his face, trying to read the storm behind his calm exterior. He leaned back, running a hand over his close-cropped hair, and began to explain. "The night of your surgery," he said, "there was a mix-up. Dr. Patel was called away on an emergency, and I was the only one available. The team was short-staffed, budget cuts, you know how it is. I wasn't supposed to operate alone, but you were crashing. There wasn't time to wait." His voice cracked, just slightly, and I saw the weight of that decision in his eyes. "I broke protocol to save you, Javier, and now they're investigating me for it." My stomach twisted. I'd been so caught up in my own survival, in the way Elias made me feel, that I hadn't considered what he'd risked. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you in trouble?" He shrugged, but it wasn't casual. "Maybe. The hospital board doesn't take kindly to rule-breaking, even if it saves a life. They're looking at my license, my job." He paused, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I'd do it again, though. For you." Those last two words hit like a tidal wave. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him I didn't deserve that kind of sacrifice, but I was frozen. Instead, I asked, "Why me?" Elias looked up, his eyes searching mine. "Because when I saw you on that table, fighting to stay alive, I saw someone who wasn't done yet. Someone who had more to give, more to be." He hesitated, then added, "And maybe because I saw a little of myself in you." The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat was tight with emotions I hadn't let myself feel in years. Instead, I reached out, my hand brushing his. It was a small gesture, but it felt like crossing a line I'd never dared to cross before. Over the next few days, our connection deepened. Elias would sneak me extra Jell-O from the cafeteria, claiming it was doctor's orders, and we'd laugh over the absurdity of hospital food. He told me about his dreams of opening a free clinic someday, of helping people who couldn't afford care. I told him about my job as a graphic designer, how I'd always wanted to create something that mattered, something that told stories like mine. We were building something fragile but real, a bridge between two lives that shouldn't have crossed but did. But the hospital wasn't a bubble we could stay in forever. The investigation was gaining traction, and Elias was called into meetings with stern-faced administrators. He tried to hide it, but I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched when he thought I wasn't watching. One night, he came to my room after a particularly brutal meeting, his eyes red-rimmed. "They're talking about suspending me," he said, his voice raw. "They say I put the hospital at risk." "That's bullshit," I said, anger flaring. "You saved my life." He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Rules are rules, and I broke them." He sat on the edge of my bed, closer than ever, and I could feel the heat of his presence. "I don't regret it, Javier. I don't know what's next." I reached for his hand again, this time holding it firmly. "You're not alone in this," I said. "I'm here." It was the first time I'd admitted, even to myself, that I wanted to be part of his fight. The next morning, I was cleared to leave the hospital. Elias helped me pack, his hands lingering as he handed me my jacket. "You don't have to do this alone either," he said quietly. "Recovery's tough. If you need me, I'm here." I nodded, my chest tight with something I couldn't name. As I left the hospital, the Seattle rain greeted me, soft and relentless. I felt like I was stepping into a new world, one where I wasn't just surviving but living for him, for us, for the possibility of something more. The weeks after leaving the hospital were a blur of physical therapy and quiet nights in my small Capitol Hill apartment. Seattle's gray skies mirrored the uncertainty in my life, but Elias was a constant. He texted me daily, checking in with a mix of doctorly concern and something warmer, something that made my heart race. "Don't skip your PT," he'd write, followed by a photo of Duke, his dog, sprawled on a couch. I'd reply with a sarcastic quip, but inside, I was counting the minutes until I'd see him again. We met for coffee at a cozy shop in Fremont, a place with mismatched chairs and the smell of roasted beans. Elias was waiting when I arrived, his smile brighter than the overcast sky outside. He was 32, but in that moment he looked younger, unburdened. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing from our favorite books to the fears we'd never shared with anyone else. He admitted he'd always wanted to learn to paint, to capture the world in colors instead of stitches. I confessed I'd been sketching him in my notebook, his face taking shape in charcoal lines. But the investigation loomed over us like a storm cloud. Elias was candid about it now, telling me how the hospital board was digging into every detail of that night. They'd found irregularities in the staffing logs, questions about why he hadn't called for backup. "They're making it sound like I was reckless," he said, his voice tight, "like I didn't care about the consequences." "You cared about me," I said, my voice firm. "That's not reckless. That's human." He looked at me, his eyes softening. "You make it sound so simple." "It is," I said, and for the first time I believed it. I was falling for him hard and fast, and it scared me as much as it thrilled me. I'd spent so long hiding my truth, but with Elias, I wanted to be seen. That night, he invited me to his place for dinner. His apartment was small but warm, filled with books and records, a testament to a life lived with intention. Duke greeted me with a wagging tail, and I laughed as he nearly knocked me over. Elias cooked pasta with a homemade sauce that was better than anything I'd tasted in months. We ate on his tiny balcony, the city lights twinkling below us. When he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. "I've never done this," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "Been open like this, with anyone." He squeezed my hand. "Me neither. Not really. But with you, it feels right." The moment was perfect, but it was fleeting. The next day, Elias got a call from the hospital. The board had made a decision. He was suspended pending a full review. He showed up at my apartment that evening, his face a mask of exhaustion. "I might lose everything," he said, his voice breaking. "My career, my purpose." I pulled him into a hug, feeling his body tremble against mine. "You won't lose me," I whispered. "We'll fight this together." The suspension hit Elias hard. He tried to keep up his usual routine, walks with Duke, late-night jazz at his favorite bar, but I could see the strain. He was a man who'd built his life around saving others, and now he was fighting to save himself. I wanted to be his anchor the way he'd been mine in that operating room. I started digging into the hospital's policies, poring over public records and talking to a friend who worked in medical law. The board's case against Elias hinged on technicalities: missing signatures, incomplete logs, but there was no evidence he'd endangered me. In fact, the data showed my survival was a miracle one Elias had made possible. I reached out to a local journalist, Mia-chan, who was known for exposing hospital mismanagement. She agreed to look into the story, but we needed more. Elias was hesitant at first. "I don't want to make this a circus," he said one night as we sat in my apartment, pizza boxes scattered on the table. "I just want to do my job." "This isn't just about you," I said. "It's about every patient who needs someone like you. If we don't fight, they win." He looked at me, his eyes searching, and then nodded. "Okay, let's do this." We spent weeks gathering evidence. Testimonies from nurses who'd worked that night, records of the hospital's chronic understaffing, even my own account of waking up in the OR. Mia's investigation uncovered a pattern. The hospital had been cutting corners for years, prioritizing profits over patient care. Elias's case was just the tip of the iceberg. As the story gained traction, the public rallied behind Elias. Protests sprang up outside the hospital, with signs reading, "Save Dr. Carter," and "Patience over profits." I stood with him at one, our hands clasped tightly, and for the first time I felt proud to be out, to be seen. But the attention came with a cost. Hate mail started arriving at Elias's apartment. Anonymous letters filled with slurs, blaming his lifestyle for his troubles. I saw the hurt in his eyes, but he never wavered. One night, as we lay in bed, the weight of it all pressed down on us. "Do you ever wish you hadn't saved me?" I asked, half joking, half afraid of the answer. He turned to me, his hand cupping my face. "Never," he said. "You're my reason to keep going." Those words carried us through the darkest moments. When the board called Elias back for a final hearing, we were ready. I testified on his behalf, my voice steady as I recounted that night in the OR, how his presence had kept me alive. The room was silent as I spoke, and when I finished, Elias reached for my hand, his grip fierce. The hearing room was cold, sterile, a cruel echo of the operating room where this all began. Elias sat beside me, his jaw tight, his hands folded in his lap. The board's decision would come today, and I could feel the weight of it in every breath. Mia's article had gone viral, and the public outcry had forced the hospital to reconsider. They couldn't ignore the evidence we'd gathered, the understaffing, the ignored protocols, the lives Elias had saved despite it all. When the board chair read the verdict, her voice was clipped but clear. "Dr. Carter, your suspension is lifted. You're reinstated, effective immediately." The room erupted in cheers, but Elias didn't move. He just looked at me, his eyes glistening. "We did it," he whispered, and I pulled him into a hug, not caring who saw. That night, we celebrated at the jazz bar he loved, the music wrapping around us like a warm embrace. We danced, slow and close, and I felt the world shift. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, fully and unapologetically. Elias had given me that, not just in the operating room but in every moment since. Months later, we stood together at the opening of his free clinic, a small space in a Seattle neighborhood that needed it most. I designed the logo, a simple heart with a stethoscope wrapped around it, and Elias had poured his soul into making it real. As we cut the ribbon, he leaned over and whispered, "This is for us, for everyone like us." Our story wasn't perfect. There were still scars, mine physical, his emotional, but they were proof of what we'd overcome. We'd fought for each other, for love, for the right to be who we were. And in that fight, we'd found a reason to stay awake, to keep going, to build a life together. As we stood under the cherry tree in the hospital courtyard, the same one from that first tender moment, I took his hand. "You saved me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He smiled, his eyes bright. "And you saved me right back."